Welcome back to another episode of the Tech Talks Daily podcast. I'm your host, Neil C. Hughes, and today we're going to be diving deep into an issue that's been flying under the radar for far too long. That is the environmental impact of data storage. My guest today is Matt Watts, Chief Technology Evangelist at NetApp, and he's here to shed light on this pressing concern and also discuss why organisations must start taking a closer look at their data practices if they're serious about achieving green data success. And I think as businesses continue to expand their digital footprints, the need for sustainable data storage procedures and practices is more critical than ever. And with nearly a decade of experience at NetApp, Matt has witnessed the evolution of technology and strategy, including the recent push towards a more sustainable future. So Matt's going to be providing his actionable insights on how your organisation can avoid falling into the green data blind spot and understand the environmental footprint of data storage, and how businesses can not only reduce their carbon footprint, but also unlock the potential of green data storage. But enough from me. Let's get Matt onto the podcast right now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure thing, Neil. So I'm Matt Watts, and I go by the title of Chief Technology Evangelist for NetApp, which is, to be honest, it could be called lots of different things. I'm a futurist. I'm looking at kind of future trends and technologies. And then I provide advice to customers, clients, partners, and of course, I back into NetApp. And NetApp, just for people listening to this, in case they didn't know, we're an intelligent data infrastructure company, which means that we provide technology to help companies store data in their own data centers, but our technology also exists as a first-party service in Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. And we deal with compliance and security, so really focused on helping companies store, manage, protect these massive quantities of data.
Well, it's a huge pleasure to have you on the show today, and there's so much I want to talk with you about. And every day I try and get people thinking differently about technology and how it can impact different parts of the business and indeed our world very often. And one of the things I wanted to explore with you today was identifying the green data blind spot. So to begin with, Matt, can you explain what the green data blind spot is and why you feel it's such a critical issue for businesses today in terms of environmental impact? Because it's a huge talking point, isn't it, right now?
It really is. And, I think just to give people some context behind this, I think technology, data, emails, all those things, because they're not sort of tangible to us, we often don't think about the impact that they can have on the environment. But, if you think about an email, every email you send probably creates 0.1, 0.2 grams of CO2 because of the infrastructure that's sat behind to move it, to store it, to protect it. If we look at businesses, the statistics show that at the moment, probably 2/3 of the data that companies create is never, ever used again after it's created. But it's sat on storage devices, which are inside data centers, which are consuming pretty significant amounts of electricity. And of course, much of that electricity comes from fossil fuel created sources. So it has a pretty substantial carbon footprint.
That's depressing looking at the state of my inbox. I'm part of the problem rather than the solution. I mean, having witnessed the shift in technology and strategy at NetApp, I'm curious, how do you see the evolution of sustainable practices in data storage?
So I think what we've seen over the years, Neil, is that people have been very fixated on creating more efficient storage products. How do we squeeze more data onto less infrastructure? So deduplication, compression, compaction, and then starting to use things like high capacity solid state drives. Those are good.
Yeah.
But they're only a small part of the problem. I think what people are realizing now is that actually the way to address sustainability is to actually identify what this massive amount of data is that we actually have. Because the most sustainable storage is the storage you don't buy. So I think people are becoming more aware that they need much, much better data analytics to help them really uncover the big opportunity here, rather than just focusing on hardware, which it's important, but it is a small part of being able to kind of reduce the CO2 environment or the CO2 footprint.
So for any business leader that's listening, maybe listening and thinking about achieving green data success in 2024, because as we said, it's a huge talking point, but maybe they find it a little challenging, overwhelming, and possibly daunting as well. So what would you say are the key steps organisations must take to gain that clearer view of their data and move towards green data success? Because that seems to be the destination or the ultimate goal that business leaders would look to get to.
It is. And I think my first piece of advice probably would be to find partners that can help. There are vendors out there that I think are exploiting this situation and are making claims that I think they're not misleading, but they're taking people down the wrong path. So I think partners have a really important role to play because they can kind of help companies to step back and not fixate on the individual pieces, but start to look at how do you build a more sustainable IT strategy. And that strategy then starts to include what are the devices that we use? Do we use the cloud, and which regions do we use the cloud? Because that could be a good option. Do we do data analytics to find out what that data is that you've got and what of it's valuable, and are there better decisions you can make with it? So I think just be careful of, false prophets to some degree. And I think partners have a really important role to play in this situation.
And just to expand on that, is there any actionable advice that you could offer for any organisations looking to avoid a green data blind spot as well, and also embrace more sustainable data storage practices? Anything you can share around that?
Yes, I think the thing that people have to realise is the challenge with all of this is ownership. And Neil, you and I have probably been in the industry for quite a while, assuming from your profile. One of the things that we've always had has always been an issue in this industry is ownership. If you go and talk to the people that are creating the data, the application owners, quite often they'll say, well, it's not our data, it's the IT team's data. And then you go and talk to the IT team, and the IT team say, it's not our data, we're just the custodians of it for these other groups. I think that's the biggest challenge that we've had and that continues to face us, is until we can get some sense of ownership around data, only then do you start to get some responsibility and you're able to actually start moving forward and making better, more informed, greener decisions about how you deal with that mountain of data going forward as well.
And of course, the old adage in business has always been you can only improve what you measure. So when it comes to measuring environmental impact of data, how can measurement and reporting mechanisms help businesses understand and ultimately mitigate the environmental implications of their data storage and expansion? How or where do you begin on something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question, Neil, because whilst there are some standards out there and there are more starting to come through, there's a real lack of kind of quantifiable or objective measurements that you can apply to this. Right now, all we have is the best information, the best statistics that are available to us. So it's very, very difficult for people. If I think about, us as a company, and, I'm not here to specifically plug what we do, but one of the things that we have provided is a sustainability dashboard. So we give people a tool that allows them to understand exactly what power is being consumed by the NetApp devices that they're running in their facilities. And then we give them actionable recommendations. If you were to take this action, this is how much the power would be reduced. And now what we're starting to build into that is the ability for people to put in what is the fossil fuel, the renewable energy mix in their particular region or their particular facility. So it's going to take vendors like us across the whole industry to really start working more closely together on those types of standards, because it really is, quite frankly, it's a minefield at the moment.
And I think any tech project in any area of a business, very often we see the implementation of new technology, bringing in new partnerships, new dashboards, etc. But ultimately, it's always people that's required to drive change, and changing a company culture is often very difficult too. So can you expand on what the importance of fostering a culture of responsible data usage is and why it's essential for businesses, and how to effectively implement this? Because that's often the most difficult aspect of any change, isn't it?
It is, and it's interesting being involved in this topic for as long as I have. when people sort of say to me, well, why sustainability? Why now? And I typically say there are three reasons that most companies will look at sustainability, which is people, profit, and planet. And I'll focus on the people one because I think that's most related to this. There is a limited talent pool available to the market right now. There are a lot of unfilled IT roles out there. So a lot of companies are already struggling to bring in the kind of technical resources they need to do the things that they currently need done. A lot of that resource, a lot of those people are now looking at companies and almost thinking, I want to work for a company that represents kind of my standards, my ethics, my values, the things that are important to me. And of course, for a lot of people nowadays, that is sustainability. So I think there's several things. I think one, companies have to evolve. Otherwise, they are going to disenfranchise, I think, some of their existing employees. And they're also going to limit their access to bringing in kind of new talent. One of the things that we've found, though, is to the culture change ground up. As we at NetApp really started to work out how do we make a difference, we went to our people and said, look, we want to start creating communities within NetApp that care about this, who can come up with ideas at the kind of the ground level that'll start making a difference. I have to say, it's been remarkable. The variety of ideas that have come from these different groups that we're now able to act on, is phenomenal. And it's helped with that culture. When you start doing something at that ground level, suddenly, cultures are built kind of from communities and from these kind of large groups rather than being pushed down from above. So my advice to everybody would be work out and start to understand how you can build these communities and give these communities a sense of responsibility, a sense of that they can own something and actually help the company move forward with these sort of sustainability agendas. So I think that would probably be the best place to start because it touches so many different aspects of this, Neil.
Fantastic. And I think if we also look back throughout the history of technology and IT departments, I think traditionally IT departments have often been accused of being more reactive and firefighting than proactive. And thankfully, I think in recent years, that is changing now. But what proactive data estate management actions do you think businesses could undertake to eradicate things like waste and ultimately improve sustainability across their operations? Because when we're increasingly talking about things like ESG, it's at board level now that these discussions are taking place, aren't they?
Absolutely. I mean, the statistic, or the kind of the figures we get from the analysts say that, sustainability as an element of ESG is, it's top 5 priorities on the CEO agenda. Yeah. So, we know it's very, very key at that level. I think IT has an incredible role to play, and it's to some degree, it's not new for IT. Because if you think about it, we've been driving the efficiency agenda for decades. Well, efficiency and sustainability are sometimes kind of the different sides of the same coin. So I think what IT has got to work out is how do you turn the metrics that we've always used for efficiency into metrics that we can use to demonstrate an improvement in sustainability. In terms of data, we simply need to get a much better understanding of what the data is that we've got. We did a data waste index survey, which people can find on our website. And it's amazing how few companies really understand what the data landscape actually looks like. So again, and kind of an actionable thing for people to take away is, unless you know exactly what it is that you've got and are able to look into that and interrogate that to work out how old is it, when was it last accessed, is it data that we know has no value to the business because of its type or its extension. If you don't have that, you simply can't manage it. You can't take steps to remediate and make more sustainable decisions around data going forward. So data analytics and helping people understand that efficiency and sustainability, those two things are related. It's just working out how do you present or represent sustainability in a way that's really going to mean something to people.
And we are at that magical time of year as we record this podcast. We're reaching the the end of a year, starting to look with hope and optimism and the positive changes that we can implement in our businesses next year in 2024. So if I was to ask you to gaze into my virtual crystal ball and look at the future of sustainable data storage, looking ahead, how do you envision the future of sustainable data storage, and what should businesses be doing now to prepare for these developments? And of course, on the flip side, we've also got, ironically, artificial intelligence that businesses are embracing rapidly, and there's a few environmental impacts around that too, which maybe we could have in another conversation on another day. But what do you see next year and beyond?
Yeah, wow, artificial intelligence. I mean, what a year it's been for that particular topic, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of the projections of how big do we think data is going to become. I mean, let me give you some numbers here, right? If we think about the amount of data that we're creating, if we continue at the rate that we are, by 2030, we will create a yottabyte of data. Now, that's all of the data created by all of the things that are out there. To put that into context for people, that's the equivalent of every single human being on the planet carrying 500 iPhones. That's the scope of what we're talking about. Now, most people listening to this, we can't dramatically affect that at that scale, but data centers are already responsible for 2% of the world's power consumption, forecast to grow maybe up towards 8%. So these numbers that we're starting to see, I think, are now so big that being able to make kind of marginal, tangible differences to them can have a huge sustainability impact. So I think if we think about what's going to happen next year, CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, first companies have to report in January, and an element of that reporting has to be independently audited sustainability data, and that will gather more and more and more companies into it over the next 2 to 3 years. So I think that will increase the visibility, and I think will increase the focus on it. To your point, AI, these projections, the yottabyte projection, they didn't account for the fact that AI was going to be democratized to the point where every single company in the world is trying to work out how do generative AI, large language models, the ChatGPT type technologies, how are they going to help them to improve productivities and find new things to do as well? And I think that will increasingly shine a light on the volumes of data, because this is going to get really expensive for companies as they suddenly start to realize that what they've been storing is just scratching the surface of what they're going to be storing going forward. And what I hope is that because we've got such a focus on sustainability, such a focus on the environment, on green, that as people realize the volume, the cost, they'll also start to look at it and say, well, we also need to understand what's the sustainability, what's the environmental impact of this kind of massive data growth that we're seeing as well. So I think AI will shine more light onto the topic of sustainability because of the vast quantities of data it's going to create and people's increasing awareness and regulations around sustainability and sustainability reporting.
And I'm curious, from all the conversations you're having with business leaders all around the world, is everything we're talking about here today, is this top of mind? Is this stuff that they're going after next year? And it's not just trending news stories that we're seeing on our newsfeed. There is action, people taking action next year.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting question, Neil, because what we have witnessed almost across the board, people who are putting out RFPs, sustainability is now on most of those. And in fact, we're seeing in some cases, particularly in government, in kind of in public sector, anything up to 20 or 25% of the marks that are being awarded for the RFP are quite often related to sustainability. So we're definitely seeing that is coming to the front and center in terms of people's buying criteria. When I go and meet with people, it's not spreading down through the organizations quickly and as broadly as it needs to. When I do raise it and say, is sustainability on the agenda, a lot of the times you get the nodding heads, but it still very much feels right now that it's more of a tick box. That, as long as you tell me as a supplier that you have good sustainability credentials, I can tick the box for my higher up, the people above me in the organization. I think next year, what we'll start to see is that will turn more into meaningful metrics. It's no good for you just to tell me your technology ticks sustainability boxes. What you need to do is help me understand how your technology is going to take me from where I currently am to a tangible, measurable place of where I need to get to. That's what I need to report further up. So I think next year it'll become much more broad. And I think companies will be asking for a lot more detail behind it rather than just, can I tick the sustainability box on the RFP or the checklist?
And I'd love to hear more about how that continues to evolve next year. So we will be getting you back on the podcast next year, maybe mid next year, see how things are changing. But we've talked about a lot of serious subjects today, and I always like to finish the podcast by having a little fun with my guests. So you may or may not know, we've got a Spotify playlist. So I always ask my guests to add a song to that list, something that means something to them, important to them. All I'm going to ask is, what song would you like to add to that playlist and why?
I would like to add to that playlist, Good Riddance, Time of Your Life by Green Day. And the reason why is if you listen to the song, it sounds quite sort of sad. It's a beautiful kind of melody. But if you actually read the lyrics are actually positive. The lyrics are actually about hope. The lyrics are actually about celebrating things. And so much so that I actually had that as the song that my wife and I danced to at our wedding.
Oh man, what a fantastic song, and a beautiful reason for it too. Absolutely love that. So I'll get that added straight to our Spotify playlist. And for anybody listening wanting to dig a little bit deeper on some of the things that we talked about today, maybe they want to understand the environmental footprint of data storage and how their business can be able to drive more sustainable practices, unlock the potential of green data storage, etc. Where would you like to point everyone listening?
So I guess a couple of places. Come and look for me on LinkedIn. I'm fairly prolific in terms of putting out content relating to sustainability and other topics as well. And I'm not there just to kind of plug NetApp. I try and keep my content something that I think people will benefit from more broadly. It's perspectives on the future. And if you are interested in talking to us, netapp.com, we have sustainability pages there. And then, of course, we work with partners all across the UK, so CDW, Computer Centre, SCC, you name it. And all of them are building really good practices around helping companies understand this topic as well. So those would be my recommendations, Neil.
Awesome. Well, I'll get the links added to the show notes so people can find you nice and easy. But love chatting with you today about the real actionable takeaways there from the proactive data estate management actions that businesses can undertake to eradicate things like waste and improve sustainability. And also something that we don't talk about enough, the necessity of fostering responsible data usage cultures. I think the culture aspect is absolutely crucial, and even having time to leave us with a cracking tune to boot. So thanks again for joining me today, Matt, and hopefully we'll speak with you again next year.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Neil, and I look forward to the next conversation.
So a huge thank you to Matt for sharing his expertise and shedding light on the critical issue of green data storage. And I think it's evident that environmental impact of data storage is a challenge that we can no longer ignore. And by taking proactive measures, fostering responsible data practices and leveraging data analytics, organisations can make significant strides towards a more sustainable future. But if you found today's episode valuable, don't forget to subscribe, rate and review Tech Talks Daily. Your feedback really helps me continue to bring you thought-provoking conversations like this one, attract more guests and have that dreaded algorithm smile in our direction and bring more listeners to the show. And also, you can email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, just @Neil C. Hughes. I'd love to hear from you, so send me a quick message over the holidays. But that's it for today, so thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.